Welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to look at Nvidia, particularly at the latest earnings results. I'm going to do an analysis looking at all the upside, the downside. We're going to look at what has been discussed during the earnings call. We're going to look at estimates, particularly as the Rubin potentially is going to start in the second half of 26, but there are still some uncertainties in regards to that. Then I'm going to go through the fundamentals to understand why investors are paying a premium on the share price. And finally, we're going to look at the timeline that the company has for its GPU and particularly for the AI superchips. Now, let's start first with the upside. By the way, I'm going to show you how I analyze an earnings call using a simple prompt. Don't worry, I will share the prompts as soon as my app is live, hopefully in the next months. It's a lot of coding, but it's really powerful. So let's go through it. We had the record second quarter results and, of course, strength in data center. So the overall revenue was 46.7. That was a beat compared to the previous expectation. Sequential growth as well. Data center was up by 56% year over year. It grows sequentially despite the 4 billion headwind due to the H20s. You already know the issue in China. So if I go to the fundamentals, and I have a closer look at the data center segments, right? You can see the AI supercycle, particularly, exactly when it began. That was July 23. Crazy. So if you look at the percent change, all right, this is a metric that people are paying very close attention to. You can see that, well, you can't because I'm in the way. Hopefully you can now. You will be able to see that, the growth rate is going down naturally because when you're growing revenues of how much was that? 40 billion, right? It's very difficult to grow them at 50% year over year. So that's why you see the decline. This is the power scale essentially. So yeah, what I'm seeing here is still encouraging, even though it's going down. Let's find out a little bit more, particularly on guidance. I want to see what's the guidance for the next quarter. So the next point is on Blackwell. Should we look at guidance? Yeah, let's look at guidance first. So the guidance, I think the company has an outlook section. There you go. So we have the outlook revenue expected to be 54 billion in the next quarter. All right. The company has not assumed any H20 shipments to China, which is really interesting. GAAP and non-GAAP gross margin expected to be 73 to mid 73%. Operating expenses, all right. Interesting. So the company doesn't guide data center revenue. Let's see what is the consensus for that. So have a look at how I analyze. Check this out. Give me a full comprehensive analysis of the analyst consensus for Nvidia's data center segment going into the back half of 2025 and next year in 2026. So that's going to take a while, a few minutes until it loads. So I'm going to just carry on and then come back to the topic. Essentially, I want to see what growth the company expects in data center, because so far we can see 56%. Of course, that's possibly going to go down because of the law of large numbers. The higher the revenue, the more difficult it is to grow at a rate of 154% as it was in last year in July 24. However, 56% is not bad. In fact, if you look at the guidance, so they estimate 54 billion. All right, so 54 billion. Let's look at what the street expects quarterly. We look at next quarter, 55%. Yeah, it's pretty much the same growth rate, which is crazy. So just to conclude, 56.4 was, sorry, this is the data center revenue. No, that's the consolidated revenue. Yeah, so if you go to the income statement and you look at revenues, 55.6% for the overall company. That includes gaming. It includes all the other small segments. We're going to look at them later on. 55.6, that was the last quarter. Expectation is for 55.6. So the growth rate is going to stay constant. And if it stays constant at 55%, I think it's more than reasonable to assume that the valuation, which doesn't look that much stretched, I mean, Broadcom, you could argue that Broadcom, which I did analysis earlier, you could argue that its valuation ratios are a bit stretched. But Nvidia, I mean, if you look at PE ratios for the next year, I think Broadcom was 111 and Nvidia is 38. So 3 times cheaper than Broadcom. And you have to consider the hype around the stock. So yeah, it's difficult to say that, you know, everything is priced in and you have no chances to make money with this. It's actually stupid. Anyways, let's see if we have anything. No, not yet, on the guidance for data centers. I'm very interested in that data center segment, and the reason is simple. If you look at the different segments and you look at the common size, so how much each particular segment is contributing to the overall revenue of the company, data center revenue in the last quarter was 88% of the entire revenue. Okay, so 88% of all revenues came from data center products, particularly the GBs. I believe it's the 200 are the ones that ramped. I think 300, the Ultra, also ramped, also began mass production in the last quarter. We're going to see in some details later, but most of that is driven by GB 200s. Revenue from gaming, 9.2%, and then you have professional visualization and automotive, very small. That's why I don't really look at these two segments, because they just don't matter. And don't get me wrong, when I say they don't matter, the company makes over $1 billion from these two segments, which will be a lot for a lot of companies, you know. But and when you look at the growth rates, they're not bad either. I mean, 69% year-over-year increase in automotive. Just look at the trend. Not bad. And when you look at professional and visualization revenue, the growth rate is in the low 30s. So very good. I don't see any segments slowing down in terms of revenue. Let's see. Do we have the analysis? We do, finally. So let's see. We're looking for guidance for the data center segment. Let's see what the street is projecting. So where the consensus stands right now. Okay, data center revenue up 56%, 5% sequentially. That was, that was the last quarter. Yeah, second quarter 26. Now, if you look at the full year, data center for fiscal 26, street compilers put this in the 177 to 189 range. Okay, this is very interesting. So Visible Alpha in earlier 25 showed 183 to 188 billion as estimates were revised up around GTC. I think that one is quite old. Yeah, it's from December or March. Yeah, it's quite, these estimates are too old, and yeah, I wouldn't trust that one that much. For fiscal 26, this is for the overall revenue, and we already have the figure. So Seeking Alpha has an annual time frame, and you can see there for January 26, 58% is the consensus. And then next year, 32%, and then 17%. So you can see that the growth rate is decelerating as we go through the years. I have to say I'm not really encouraged by what's the expectations in 2028. 17%. I mean, of course, when you look at the total revenue, it's difficult to grow at 50% when you have 300 billion in revenue. But still, the Rubin family, and you can see here you have the roadmap for the GPUs. And in 2026, hopefully we're gonna see Rubin in the second half, and then in the first half you're gonna see the Rubin Ultra, first half of 27. And moving into 2028, you're gonna see the Feynman, and possibilities for the second half of 2028. So yeah, when you look at the years, the year ending in 2029, which is when, in theory, you should have the Feynman. analysts, which is not a lot, I have to say, they project just 10% increase in revenue. So yeah, to all that, you have to consider that these revisions were, that these estimates were revised upwards. I mean, just look at the trend. This is in EPS and this is in revenue. So for example, the January 26, the one in orange, you see it on the chart, that was revised upwards in the last 3 months by about 3%. And if you look at, for example, January 28, yeah, the 3 months trend or the 6 month trend is almost 10% more than it was back then. So overall, the revisions are very positive. And even though at first glance, when you look at this and you say, just 17% growth in 2028, is that bad? Maybe, but I will wait for at least the second half of 2026 to see whether this consensus is still there or maybe it goes up. All right, let's go back to the earnings call and continue with the upside analysis. So far, this is the expectation, but it's too old. So that's for the entire fiscal 26. They project about 183 billion. Yeah, but it was in August, so I'm not able to do the analysis and say, right, so that is X% because possibly that value changed. Right, let's move on to Blackwell. So we had the GB300 ramp. Blackwell record, of course, it's a record levels, it's on ramp, 17% sequentially. GB300 production began in the second quarter. This is very important for margins because this is a more expensive model. In fact, the company noted that the GB300 in the NVR72 configuration, it has an ROI, right? So you invest 3 million in infrastructure and you make 30 million in token revenue. So 10x. Not bad. I will be curious to know what is the math behind this 30 million. Does it take into account depreciation? Does it take into account, what's the electricity cost that they take into account too? Because that's just revenue. That's the thing, it's just revenue. So if you spend 3 million in a GPU and you make 30 million in revenue, you have to understand, right, how much did I spend in electricity? How much did I spend in, it's not a spend, it's depreciation is difficult to see it because you can only see the spend when the GPU burns, and you can no longer use it. That's when you have to trash it. But depreciation is one of these non-cash expenses that it's important, but it's difficult to take it seriously because you see the refreshing cycles. I mean, a GB300 now in 2 years is going to be obsolete because you're going to have the Rubin Ultra. And now the data centers, the hyperscalers are going to be like, why do we need a GB300 anymore? We don't need it. Even though it can still perform, even though it's still functional, they're going to have to replace it. And possibly they're going to get rid of the GB300s. Who knows, maybe China? Nah, I don't think China will ever get a GB300 because that's way, way too much compute. In fact, I think there was some metrics in regards to how good these GB300s are. So the factory is producing 1,000 racks a week, which is really good. The output is to accelerate in Q3, and they expect widespread availability of this family in the second quarter. Let me just go to see whether they have some metrics for the GB300. Let me do a Control F. I think it's going to be way easier. Right, no, 6, 7. There you go. Yeah, perfect. Exactly what I was looking for. So GB300, they achieved 7x faster training than H100, which is 2 years ago, right? And 7x faster training. That's a lot. Not bad. Not bad for a benchmark. Wow. All right, let's move on. So, software-driven performance gains, Blackwell performance. Speaking of the performance, 2x since launching via CUDA. Open libraries integrated into millions of workflows. Okay. Networking momentum. Oh, this is interesting. So networking, it went up by 46% and sequentially by 98%. Not bad. So these are the two main products in the networking segment. This is a Spectrum, Ethernet switches, and InfiniBand, of course, and also the NVLink. And here is where Nvidia is at almost a direct competitor from Broadcom. And if you look at the charts Friday, and I gotta say the chart doesn't look very good. This Friday drop, I'm not very encouraged by that. It's not concerning because if you move the line down, that's potentially a support level. All right. But if you focus more recently, you had the support at 170 and now it went down. So hopefully at 160, mid 160 is going to find a bounce back. My point is that the drop, which is 2.7% on Friday, was not due to the broader sell-off, because you had a small increase in the unemployment to 4.3, which, by the way, as I discussed in my previous video, that was already priced in. When you go to, let's see, we got Broadcom, AVGO. It's such an unintuitive ticker name. Broadcom, I also did a video on this. It blew up by double digits on Friday. And one of the reasons was a major contract announced, possibly with OpenAI. That's about 10 billion for XPUs. And some of the semiconductor segments, particularly AI, in the AI sub-segment that Broadcom has, is in direct competition with Nvidia. And one of those things are the Spectrum Ethernet and InfiniBand products. And I believe the direct competitor was the Jericho 4 switches and the Tomahawk 6 chips. So this is something to consider because you have a lot of growth. So I will keep a close eye to see what the networking revenue is doing moving ahead. And my main point is to understand whether Broadcom is actually taking share from Nvidia in regards to this. All right, annualized revenue over 10 billion for Spectrum. Not bad. So it seems that Spectrum is driving the networking revenue. 10 billion, no, that's a lot. InfiniBand nearly doubled on revenue, okay. And the NVLink, 14 PCI Gen 5 bandwidth, okay. Hopper resilience and H20 sales out of China. This is a big topic. We have sequential increase in shipments, for I think these are the H20s, and they sold 650 million in the last quarter to an unrestricted customer outside of China. So that helped from a gross margin perspective because the more you sell, the less write-downs you have. So that's interesting. 650 million sold. And I believe the headwind was overall, let me go back. Was it 4 billion? Yeah. So that was the headwind the company expects due to the H20s in the top line. Perfect. Now moving on, we had, near-term upside for China. So the Q3 outlook excludes the H20s. The Q3 outlook, I think it was pricing in 56%. So the street, this is the street, which is very close to what management expects, by the way. 55.6% is the growth in the next quarter. I mean, this current quarter. And it seems that H20s are excluded. So the company says that if the issue is resolved, there is an upside of 2 to 5 billion in the third quarter. Okay. Sovereign AI, we have on track for over 20 billion. Sovereign AI, possibly these are the ones in Dubai or the Emirates or in Saudi Arabia. UK as well. Interesting. And the EU plans to establish 20 billion, 20 factories. I'm a bit hesitant because the EU is not really It's not really an AI adopter. And you notice that when you look at Palantir's earnings calls and you see Alex Karp roasting AI, enterprise companies in Europe because they don't adopt AI. In fact, I think he said that AI growth in Europe was anemic. So, yeah. All right, let's see. This is, I believe, the other segments. RTX, this is for gaming. RTX Pro, servers in full production. No, sorry, the RTX Pro, these are servers for enterprises. All right. This is positioned to be a multi-billion-dollar product line. Yeah, but anything that's not hyperscale adoption, yeah, individual enterprises have a hard time to build their own data centers because they don't have the discounts that the hyperscalers do, or they don't have the capex that they do. All right, so robotics, yeah, it's a small segment. Gaming is the second segment, so 9%. I think we saw it earlier. It was 9%. When we look at the segments again, 9.2%. So gaming was 9.2% of the overall revenue of the company. And you can see the trend. Back in 21, half of the revenue that Nvidia generated came from gaming. And just look at the chart now. It's only 9%, 6% in January 25. And if you look at data center revenue, you can see that this chart tells you the story of Nvidia, right? It tells you that since 23, actually, it was mid 23 when I see the big spike, the big separation. That's when the company focused on data centers, and gaming was not as important now, even though gaming is still growing. So as I said, I think gaming was up by 49%, I believe, 49%, yeah, in the last quarter. So the growth is not bad either, huh? It's not a lot of revenue, but the growth is all right. Right, AI and PCs, yeah, consumer, I don't care about that. Professional visualization, 32%, yeah, there is growth, but 600 million, that's not a lot for them. Automotive, they have the Thor shipments. Okay, this is partially interesting because you have a lot of robotaxis. So maybe the public, the market participants are looking at the automotive segment, but I don't know. It's just $500 million. Nothing compared to data center. Now, this is one of the points exactly. So Q3 outlook. We've got 54 billion. This is what management expects. The margin of error is 2%, 7 billion sequential growth, and that excludes the H20s to China. So what I think is going to happen is that eventually the company is going to define that 15% tax, which is not a tax, it's a deal, but it's a freaking tax. It's industrial policy. And I think that Nvidia is going to reach. The agreement is already there, but they want to see it on paper. So if you look at the headwinds that the company has, the company says that the U.S. government, the officials in the U.S. government, they expressed an expectation for the 15% revenue share, right, for H20 sales, but they haven't been codified in regulation. So essentially that was a verbal agreement, but they want to see it on paper. Show me the paper. And until it's on paper, they cannot sell the H20s because they don't know whether it's going to be 15%, whether the US government is going to trick them and now it's going to be 30%, or they want to see everything on paper, right? And that makes sense. So I think this is a huge catalyst for Nvidia, because I don't think the US government is incentivized to wait, because the more they wait, right now it's costing them money. And 15% of revenue for H20, if the expectation was, how much was the headwind? I think it was 4 billion in the last quarter because they couldn't sell H20s. So we're talking about almost half a billion in losses, because the deal is not on paper. So I think the US government has a rocket right now, trying to get the deal, trying to put it on paper, and trying to to send it through. So going back to the upside, I think that there isn't much more. Well, gross margins, this is a very big expectation. Yeah, we have the full year, end of year target is for mid-70s. And Jensen Huang has been pushing this target for quite a lot of time. I think it was since Q4 fiscal 2025. And the company expects to recover as they sell those H20s, the ones that they have in inventories. And if you look at inventories, by the way, let's have a look in the cash flow statements. Inventories, change in inventories, right? There you go. So all that, what you see there, is the increase in inventories because they can no longer sell the H20s. And as soon as they get that, that deal with the US on paper, they're going to be able to burn through these GPUs, the H20s. So I think that should support some of the margin recovery, even though these sales in China, especially Nvidia is competing with Huawei, with the Ascend GPU. I'm not 100% sure whether they're going to manage to sell all of them, especially if they do discounts. That's going to depress margins. So I'm a bit skeptic on these targets. And even though right now, the consensus for Q3 is 73.5%, okay, which is a margin of error 50 basis points. It's 150 basis points from the target. However, I'm just concerned, that they're gonna do a lot of discounts on those GPUs, and if they do discounts, gross margins are gonna be pressured. So something to look. I think overall the GB300s, because we've already seen earlier, if you scroll down, if you scroll up, we've seen that the GB300s, they began shipments in the second quarter, and this is very expensive. In fact, let's find out exactly how much. GB300 price Nvidia. Let's see what we find. Reddit says 80 to 90,000 per DGX station. Wow, not bad. All right, so this is the cost in the So this is if you use the NV. That makes sense. If you use the NVL72 configuration, all right, it seems that the cost is around 3.7 million per server. All right, so this is only one, the 70 to 90,000. But here you have a configuration, and the NVL72, I think it was 72 GPUs, so B300 GPUs, and 36 Grace CPUs. I think that's the NVL72 configuration. 3.7 million, right? Now it makes sense when the CFO, Colette Kress, 3 million. Now I understand why it's 3 million. So if the retail price is 3.7, hyperscalers are getting a discount. Makes sense because it's a volume-based discount, so 3 million. All right, so this is very interesting. So they pretty much revealed an order of magnitude of the price point. Maybe it's not 3, maybe it's 2.7. Who cares? I already know where the ballpark is. Very, very interesting. Very good. So moving on to the outlook, I think the GB300 is going to support the margins. Capital returns, buybacks. That's crazy. I mean, just look at that. The board approved 60 billion in buybacks. And I think it's on top. Yeah, it's on top of the 14.7 billion remaining at the end of last quarter. I mean, come on. Not bad. So Nvidia, I think it has a very interesting, especially now, I think that they have a very interesting opportunity to buy back their stock. I wouldn't be surprised to see the shares ticking up from here. I really wouldn't be surprised. I don't think they're going to stay here for too long. Maybe they're going to consolidate until they have the final approval on paper from the US government. But once they unlock the upside in China, I think this is going to tick up. All right. What else? What else we have? We have Rubin. So the Rubins are in fab at Taiwan Semiconductor. Very interesting. Let's see what the earnings call says. I'm just going to copy that excerpt and see the entire statement. So the chips of the Rubin platform are in fab. The Vera CPU, the Rubin GPU, CX9, okay, the NVLink 144, that's crazy. So right now the NVLink, it was like 72. They're going to double that. Wow. And Spectrum X. Okay, so that's for networking. Rubin remains on schedule for volume production next year. Okay, let me do a very quick search and show you how I, search the internet through AI. I want full comprehensive details on any articles by credible sources that are stating that NVIDIA's Vera Rubin is going to be delayed due to any changes in design. All right, so why did I do that? Very simple. I think about a month ago, I read an article that was saying that the Rubin was possibly going to be delayed. So right now the timeline is the second half of next year. We have there, this is the slide. I think this was from April or May this year. So H2 2026. If the Rubin is delayed, or if because you will not know if it's delayed exactly in the second half. You will know it possibly in the first half of 26, because analysts are going to double down on this, this family on the timeline. So if Rubin is delayed, that's going to be very bad for the stock. So this is a risk to consider. All right, so that's the third generation NVL rack scale. So the first one was the Hopper, the second is the Blackwell, and the third one is the Rubin. The fourth one is the Feynman. This is the one. Now, if I do a Control F on Rubin, let's see what they said during the earnings call. All right, so this is an analyst. He said, you confirmed on call today that Rubin is on track for the second half. Good. What's the question? I was hoping perhaps you could take a high-level view and speak to your vision for growth into 2026. Right. And this is the usual narrative. So one shot versus reasoning agentic AI could be 100x to 1000x potentially, and even more as the amount of research and basically reading and comprehension it goes off to do. Let me explain. Do you know why I'm using GPT-5 thinking? It's because if you look at the rationale, all right, the AI is using a very similar line of reasoning as a person would to research this topic. So if I was to see, any articles on Rubin, I would have to go on Google like a monkey and type, Vera Rubin delays, and then do a full search, maybe on page 1 and page 2, and then see which are sources that are credible, and then look in the forums as well. Let's see what people are saying, because maybe there is something on X or on Reddit that was leaked, and maybe it's interesting to consider. So it's a lot of monkey work, and thinking, you do all these steps. And each step is like a one shot. So you have a lot of one shots in this line of reasoning. And that's why Jensen is pushing that narrative that, agentic AI models could be 100 to 1000x. I agree mostly. I wanted to see something on the Vera Rubin. Yes. Let's have a look. Mid-August. I think this was the report. So Rubin is likely delayed because Nvidia is redesigning it to better compete with AMD's MI450, which is the next generation. And I'm going to do a video on AMD to show you what is their lineup for AI super chips. Now, Nvidia did deny that the report is incorrect and continue to actually they confirmed that Rubin is on track. However, I'm just wondering, where is this rumor coming from? Yeah, so this is Fubon Research, and there was an analyst seeking alpha. What was that? Is that? This is the same article, I believe. Yeah, it's a summary of the article. Yeah, so the report is incorrect. We think the next tape out schedule will be late in September, October, and based on the tape out schedule, the drop in volume will be limited in 2026. Yeah, that was my concern. So this is one topic to keep an eye on, particularly if there are more rumors that the Rubin is going to be delayed. So far, the expectation is the second half. If this is delayed, that's bad. Right, more upside. 3 to 4 trillion AI infrastructure spend by the end of the decade. Wow, that's a lot. Capex, we have doubling in 2 years to 600 billion a year. So that's how much it is right now. 1 gigabyte AI factory, which seems to be the standard, that's 50 to 60 billion. And Nvidia takes a share of 35 billion per site. That's crazy. I mean, more than half of the value of an AI factory comes from Nvidia. All right. Moving on. Anything more here? Let's see if there is anything relevant. Everything sold out. H100, H200 sold out. Okay. Yeah. CSPs. So these are the hyperscalers renting capacity from peers. Strong 2026 customer forecast. That makes sense. AI native startups funded 180 billion. Wow. You see the investment versus 100 billion last year, and that's year to date. So that's a lot. That's an 80% year-over-year increase in investments in the private sector. Revenues 2 billion to 20 billion for top AI natives, possibly OpenAI. Wow. All right. So in regards to China, seems that it's an opportunity of 50 billion if addressable with competitive products. Yeah, so exactly. This is one of the another upside that the company has is with the Blackwell in China. So I think there were rumors. I'm possibly not going to do a search with ChatGPT, or maybe yes. Let's do it because I'm going to show you how I do research now. Who needs to search on Google anyways? I want a full comprehensive overview of NVIDIA's licensing of Blackwell GPUs in China as of September 2025. Right, the reason I'm saying September 25 at the end is because there are a lot of developments that happen, and GPT-5 doesn't know when is the day. GPT-5 is trained with data that is capped at, I think it was October 24. And of course, the model is not aware what date is today. So if you don't say what date is today, it's going to look at articles around October 2024, when Blackwell was not, of course, in mass production like it is right now. So let's see, that's going to take a while, 1 minute, 2 minutes. You can see the line of reasoning, by the way, very interesting. Every time this, you see, every time this is going, you have a new line, and another request. That's money that ends up in NVIDIA's pockets. Not bad. In regards to the downside, I think we have that 2 to 5 billion H20 revenue in Q3. That's not recognized, but if they get the license, hopefully they will recognize part of that revenue. Operating expenses go up. I think it makes sense because of the Rubin developments. Did I mention the reason? Higher compute and infrastructure. All right. That makes sense because OpenAI trains its models in, using mainly Microsoft's, although now it's using others like Google's data centers. And because they have that infrastructure, which is I think they rent most of that, but although it's a partnership. I think that's the reason why it's going up. It's because the hyperscalers are increasing the prices. Maybe because they are buying the GB300s, and of course, if you're using the best of the best, prices go up. It's just an 8% quarter-over-quarter increase. Okay, so that's sequentially, that's a lot. Non-GAAP, opex, 6%. Sequential increase. 5.9 billion gap in opex. Let's have a look at the fundamentals. I'm looking for operating cash flow. Sorry, for operating expenses. Although you can see that in fiscal, you have to use Seeking Alpha for that. No, you can't see. You see, sorry, why they don't add up these values? Easier, TradingView. Let's look at operating expenses. Annual, last 12 months, no, quarterly, sorry. So last quarter, it was 5.1 billion. And if you look at the quarter ending in October 24, 4.29. And given that they're guiding 5.9, that's a year-over-year increase of 1 billion or more than 20%. Okay, that's a lot. Seems like higher compensation and benefits is going up. Let's look at stock-based compensation. Let's see what's going on there. There you go, share-based compensation, and I'm looking at the growth there. And the growth, let me see again. There, that makes sense. Okay. The growth is still a lot, it's 40% year over year. And that's the growth in share-based, stock-based compensation. Yeah, it's still below revenue, although you have to keep your talent. Otherwise, Mark Zuckerberg is going to steal it. So this makes sense. Well, it's justified. Let's say it's justified, because otherwise your talent is going to disappear. Right, what do we have here? The Blackwell in China. So there is no general license to export Blackwells. The only AI chip the US has actually licensed for China is the older Hopper H20. We know that. Nvidia is developing a China-specific Blackwell dubbed the B30A. About half of a B. Oh, that's a lot. Half of a B300 raw compute. So if the GB300 was 7x in computing compared to the Hopper family, well, that's a big increase, huh? You're talking about a 3x increase from the previous family if you have just half of the performance. It's awaiting US approval. Nvidia hopes to sample units to Chinese customers as early as September. Oh shit, seriously? Did they commit for September? Let's look at the news now. No, let's see, September. Okay, nothing there. Where's the September coming from? Okay, Nvidia Next Gen AI could double the price of H20. Let's look at the control F by September. Nothing. No. Nothing there. Maybe it's another article, an older article probably. There we go. That's how you find the rumors. Check this out. Yeah, very interesting. So you got Reuters reporting in July that Nvidia has an inventory of 600,000 to 700,000 H20 chips and has asked Taiwan Semiconductors to produce more. Sources, and this is where the rumors came, and this is very important, they have also said Nvidia is hoping to deliver samples of the B30A to Chinese clients for testing as early as September. Wow. Not bad. So possibly this quarter, wow, if the company manages to get rid of the H20s, okay, so they sell them, even if it's at a discount, and then they close contracts with approved Chinese hyperscalers for the B30, that's a massive upside in China. And if you look at the exposure the company has in this region, I think it was like 30% of revenue. Let's look at annual, yeah. So annual, China, all right, 19 billion. And if you look at the common size, China accounted for, well, 12% of revenue in the last 12 months. And usually, well, this is in the gaming era, it was 26%. But since you have the data centers and the curbs on selling GPUs there to train AI, that went down. All right. Next, gross margin. We already know the headwind, yeah. So we have 40 basis points. That was a benefit from releasing previously. Yeah, so that was from selling that 620 GPUs to a non-Chinese clients. So that helped gross margins. You can see if they get rid of those GPUs, that's going to increase gross margins. Yeah, not bad. Let's see. Let's see if they manage to reach that mid 70s target. And finally, power constraints, which we already know. I mean, hyperscalers are fighting left and right with companies. GE Vernova is one of the ones that I really like. This utility company, I have to say, GE Vernova. 200% increase in the last year. And of course, the company has massive contracts with AI companies, hyperscalers. So utility companies are not as boring as you may think initially, particularly the ones that are, dating with hyperscalers. And yeah, the company is saying that, the industry is constrained by power and building limitations. Mostly it's power. Yeah, building limitations as well. I think there was some controversies with one of Meta's, I think it was Meta's or Microsoft's data centers, because they were building in an area that had some cultural interest. Come on, we're an AI super cycle, so who cares about that today? Maybe not tomorrow, but yeah. Okay, so this is a Blackwell-based RTX tuned to see just under US bandwidth. Okay, so this one possibly they're gonna test it as well in September. All right, so there we go. Two nice tailwinds, and overall, if I look at the share price again, I gotta say I'm not happy. As I said before, I'm not happy that it broke below 170. So I don't think that's good. However, the next stop seems to be, mid 160. Let's call it 165. And it actually tested that value earlier yesterday on Friday. Very good. I'm actually not concerned about this. So yeah, let's see. Possibly this is going to consolidate until there is more certainty in China. And yeah, overall, I remain bullish. I like to see trends where the price is consolidating. Like for example, here you see the price consolidates around this level, and then it breaks out, and you have another bull run. So yeah, I think this is a good sign. Right. Thank you for watching this long video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Maybe this helped you to analyze stocks with AI. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.